Let's turn our attention to our weekly feature where we discuss the week's top stories with a panel of guests. Joining us tonight is UNISA Political Sciences Professor Dirk Kotze. I'm also joined in studio by Business Day journalist Snesipho Schreiber. And lastly, we're also hoping to be joined by author and columnist Beksisa Mncube to also give us his perspective on some of the stories making news this week. Professor Kotze, I'll start with you, and I want to begin at the testimony at the Madlanga Commission this week, where Major General Sibiya admitted taking control of 121 political task team dockets. Maybe let's speak to this. Is this administrative failure, or does it signal a deeper structural crisis within SAPS?
Well, good evening. I think the question about under which circumstances he accepted it and the movement of the files themselves became a hotly debated matter at the Commission itself. And there were clearly differences of opinion between General Kumalu's, General Sibiya's understanding of presentation of it and those especially of the three commissioners. So although we have had evidence of many other witnesses which gave a more or less a consistent version of what happened there, General Sibiya to a large extent did not go along with that. So, and what we saw is that especially the three commissioners, as well as the leader of evidence, they became almost irritated by that. And so therefore, I think this is something which General Sibiya realizes is potentially a very weak point that shows at his involvement in it, and that he took some steps that might not be necessarily in line of that of especially the National Commissioner, Masemola, General Masemola, and even the Minister. So I think that is the real contentious and controversial issue that I've picked up from this evidence.
Snesipho, while covering events at the Madlanga Commission, it was also very interesting to hear how files or dockets were simply gathering dust. Maybe let's speak to this. When case files in politically sensitive cases or matters like what's being investigated are simply left untouched, is that simply incompetence, or could it look like a deliberate obstruction from what we're hearing?
It was quite a huge factor in the case against Lieutenant Sibiya. And I do feel like he came a bit short in terms of explaining to the Commission his reasons to sort of withdraw those dockets. Firstly, denials turned into concessions. Firstly, he had denied that he had instructed the team to bring the dockets to Gauteng, but upon further investigations or upon further probing of his documents or the communication that he sent to the team, it turned out that he did give that instruction that they should be withdrawn. Whether it's politically motivated, whether it's incompetence, or the main case that he's facing, it's because his decision that he took, it was because of criminal influence. Right. Not necessarily politically, but criminal influence. And he has not given the Commission a credible evidence or substantial explanation as to why did he withdraw those dockets. He says he was following the instructions of Major General Masemola, but looking at the evidence, Masemola did not give that instruction, which begs the question, why did he pressurize the team in KZN and Lieutenant General Sentumule to withdraw those dockets? What were his reasons? He says he was trying to do what was in the best interest of the SAPS, but we don't know what that interest is. And he still has not explained his reasoning.
And speaking to that, I mean, Sibiya says he acted within his mandate, yet there's no clear written directive showing that the unit was disbanded. What does this suggest then, Snesipho, that especially about decision-making processes within the SAPS and record-keeping at senior police level?
Well, it's Lieutenant General Sibiya faces such a damning case. And before the Commission, he has not even been able to explain his reasoning. He tells them that he did not accept gratification. But in absence of gratification, what is your reasoning for doing everything? He has not provided evidence. Earlier in his testimony, he said that there were prior talks of the discussions of the withdrawal of the disbandment of the team, but he failed to give evidence that of those prior talks. Secondly, he said that Masemola did direct him to withdraw, that he failed to provide that. So when it comes to the record keeping and all of that, in this particular case, it shows that General Sibiya sort of overtook everything without a direction from his superior.
Professor Kotsa, this is all very confusing at times. I mean, when senior officials offer conflicting versions of events at a public inquiry like this, how damaging is that for institutional credibility?
I think one should, on the one hand, look at it as an institution, but in this case, very specifically about individual versions of what has happened. So I think one should not come to a conclusion if the presentation of General Sibiya is indeed what has happened there. He wants to, I think I got the impression that he wants to present a case to the commission now, which makes it very difficult to know exactly what happened and who said what. In terms of instructions and who had to do what. That would save him ultimately, because if it is very clear and other evidence is suggested that it was much clearer than his version of it, then it's not so much about whether there has been organizational disorientation or disorganization there, and that it didn't happen in accordance with a hierarchy of instructions or of instructions about what should be done. If we look at some of the other evidence that have been presented by other witnesses, then it's much clearer of what was supposed to be done and what indeed happened. There's some documents, like, for example, the so-called SS9 that I referred to, which is a document that gave some clear instructions of what should happen. In the end, I think where General Sibiya to some extent conceded is that he took the decision ultimately in the end on his own, which was not in line with the instructions of especially General Masimola.
Sipo, I want to go to a story that also made headlines this week and brought national focus, especially in Hyde Park, that shooting involving the son of late former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, Bellarmine, and another individual, we understand. Let's speak to this. When politically connected or high-profile cases like this or figures are linked to violent crime, like what we're seeing with Bellarmine, does that increase scrutiny, especially on policing standards with how these cases are investigated?
The police, when it comes to this regard, they responded promptly. They made arrest on scene. I think what will remain in terms of answering that question, what happens in court this week, when they appear in court and they are charged, we'll get to see the manifestation, whether or not everyone is equal before the law or anything like that. But at this point, we're not clear what charges they will face when they appear in court. But they are under arrest, but we will see what happens when they appear in court and what will happen afterwards, whether they will face the law as equal as everybody else or there will be some favoritism. But everyone is equal before the law.
Professor Kotsa, I'm also hoping to pick your brain about developments there as well. I mean, incidents in wealthy areas like Hyde Park, they often receive quick attention, one argues. But how does that compare to, for instance, what we discussed before, political killings in rural provinces? And what does that say about equality before the law, actually?
Yes, no, I think you are correct about that point, that there is, when it comes to this, the response by the police to cases in general, they don't happen in exactly the same way. But at the same time, you know, the fact that it is someone related to former President Mugabe, and that it is at a level where you know it can become a big issue, and that his family and his mother specifically can become involved in it, then I think they know that they have to respond quickly in order to avoid an incident between two South Africa versus Zimbabwe by implication. So I think that is the main reason why that happened. In general, one should say that police responds sometimes quicker in urban areas than in rural areas for various reasons. There are many reasons that can explain that. And that is, I think, what you are referring to, is that persons living far away from centers where there's police stations close by, there's investigators that's available, there's technology that can be used for the investigations, then it's not done in the same way as when it is in an area where those police services and technologies and infrastructure are all available and can be used quickly. But I think in the end, we have to be upfront about it. It is about the possible political implications of this.
Yeah. Snesepo, there's also a lot of confusion around circumstances around this incident. A gun apparently going missing, police even deploying search dogs to try and find this firearm, and also individuals who are basically on the scene on the day of the event, including individuals like Malcolm X. Let's get clarity over some of these issues. Firstly, what happened to the gun, and what was the involvement of some of these people who were on the property on the day?
Police on scene, they say that the suspects were uncooperative. They were not working with them. And I don't know whether or not that will affect in terms of whether they will see mounting charges against them. Yeah. In terms of hiding evidence or hiding whatever weapon was used. Maybe there might be added charges to when they appear in court, but we'll have to see when they appear in court. But the sense is that they were uncooperative with the police when they got on scene. And that might be brewing a lot of trouble for them than helping them.
And the people such as Malcolm X are seen on the property on the day. The Mugabe family, very interestingly, has come out to release a statement distancing themselves from these individuals, saying that any input from them should come through their lawyers and not these individuals that we're seeing there. Who are these people?
Actually don't know. There might be a different case in that. Maybe we might have a commission looking into that. But it is quite common when it comes to high-profile cases where you will see celebrities or whoever is friends of that person being outside, either defending the character of the suspects in court or whatever. But that does not play in any way when it comes to police dealing with the evidence, unless they are also involved in the crime. But if not, they are not involved in the crime. They're just playing to the gallery, to the media. That's about it.
Well, after the break, we continue this critical discussion, unpacking some of the week's leading news stories. And in a short while, speaking about Herman Mashaba, who was on this platform earlier, having been named Action SA's mayoral candidate for Johannesburg. We'll unpack that shortly. Do stay with us. Beksisa, it's Nhlanhla speaking here. Good evening. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll chat shortly. Hello again, and thank you for staying with us. We continue unpacking the week's leading stories. And with me this evening is UNISA Political Sciences Professor, Professor Dirk Kotzer, and I'm also joined in studio by business day journalist Nesipo Schreiber And lastly, we are joined by author and columnist Bekisisa Ncube. Professor Kotsa, I'll continue with you and turning to politics this time. Herman Mashaba, he's been named Action SA's mayoral candidate for Johannesburg. Let's speak to the significance of this. How important is this for Gauteng's political landscape?
Well, I think it's very important. I would say it's a direct response to the fact that Helen Zille is in that position for the DA, and we can expect that some of the other parties will also identify a senior person to be in this position. At the same time, we should make it clear that there's no election for a mayor. The mayor will only be elected after the election by the members of the Metro Council and not by the public or the voters in general. So it's a bit of a misnomer to talk about mayoral candidates now already, but it's going to be used as part of their campaigns, and the campaigns will very much centered around these prominent persons. So the fact that Helen Zille was the first one, and I think the DA very consciously took that decision to announce it early. So to some extent, to a large extent actually, they defined the rules of the game. And that is that it is a local government election, but it is actually done at the national level with national persons who are nationally recognizable, who will be some of the main players in that. And that put now pressure on the ANC, the ACDP, maybe even the EFF, to do something similar. Action SA has now responded to that by indeed nominating him as the leader of Action SA and the former mayor of Johannesburg. So I think by doing this, they have clearly now accepted the challenge of the DA of that the campaign will be staged at a very high level.
Mr. Ncube, thank you for joining us this evening. So as Professor Kotsa has said, the DA's mayoral candidate, Helen Zille, made it out the blocks first, and now we see Mashaba entering the fray. But he campaigns strongly on law and order and governance reform, among other issues. So given the current SAPS controversies and crime headlines that we are seeing, maybe let's add to this. Does this strengthen his message this time around?
Well, it does, actually, a great deal. When he started talking about illegal immigrants, foreign nationals, it resonates with a particular type of people, a particular type of a voter. But what I hate about his entry into the race is that it robs us, the writers, the Dada versus Gogo Zille, you know? We know that there will be no Dada there because he lost the elections as a leader of the ANC in the region of Gauteng. Now we are faced with Helen Zille and Helen Mashaba. And I will tell you right away, it's the first time that being black is going to be actually an advantage. In the past, being ANC was an advantage. Now we have two leading characters, both of them not ANC. ANC has always been slow in revealing who are we voting for. It always prepares us for the party, and then the party finally will choose who becomes mayor. But the game has changed. The ANC is found wanting, which is a bit sad. But the race is actually between two people, Helen Zille and Herman Mashaba. And I think it's going to be very interesting for Johannesburg. People of Johannesburg deserve better. We all know that. They deserve to have water. I don't fancy myself buying a property in Johannesburg and having to shower in a hotel. I think I prefer showering in my own home. And the people of Joburg deserve exactly the same.
Mr. Ncube, I see what you did there. But for jokes aside, from an electoral numbers perspective, does Herman Mashaba's candidacy even significantly shift the balance, especially in Johannesburg? Or is it mainly about consolidating a particular voter base here?
I think Professor Kotse will correct me. In 2016, when the DA took over Johannesburg, it was Herman Mashaba's face that they used to sort of play it into the politics. And it was one of the biggest shifts into the local governments, which landed Johannesburg into an unending of coalition governance. So I think a lot of Johannesburg people took a liking to him, took a liking to the policies that he puts at the fore for them. But also we see the shift from party politics to now individuals. People want to vote for people they can trust, and that is the core of the local government elections. I'm not sure if he can do what he did in 2016, or he will likely fail this time around without the DA.
Professor Kotsa, we heard Mr. Mngube's assertions earlier, also highlighting us entering another fray of race politics once again. But significantly speaking about these two black candidates who now enter, or rather Mashaba now entering the fray as Johannesburg mayoral candidate. Do you have any point to add on what makes this particular election significant or unique this time around?
Well, I would go back to my original point, and that is that it is two persons that are well known beyond Johannesburg, who has a national profile, who are now going to campaign against each other. I think the point which is still outstanding is who will be the ANC's main figure, face, personality in this election, because you can't completely ignore the ANC in this. The Action SA has done well in Johannesburg in the previous two elections, 2016 and 2021, but still is not one of the top 2-3 parties. In other places, like for example Tshwane and other parts of Gauteng, they still have a presence, but beyond Gauteng, Action SA has almost no presence. So the Johannesburg is absolutely critical for Action SA to have a good performance there. But if they don't have that, they don't produce the results in Johannesburg, then it will be highly detrimental for them for the 2029 election. But also in order to maintain the momentum that they've built up in Johannesburg. I think the dynamics in Johannesburg and in Gauteng in general are changing, and that means that given the history of the Action SA now, the way in which they act and be a player in coalition governments in Gauteng, they don't have a very good track record with that because they are in and out of coalition governments. It's seldom that the coalition partners know whether they, in the next vote, Action SA will be there for them. And I think those are the type of things that the public starts to see. And to ask themselves, is this, if this is the type of style of Action SA, is it worth it to ultimately vote for them? And at the same time, the question will be, what will be the package or the message that Action SA will present to the voters per ward, but also for Johannesburg as a whole, which is different from the ANC and the DA and the EFF and the other parties. In the past, they did it on the basis that Durban Mashaba said, I proved myself as a former mayor, or while I was the mayor, so I can do it. But that becomes now slightly history. And since then, the Action SA did not use that approach in order to make a difference and to make a real impact on local government.
Mr. Mngube, as mentioned earlier, a lot of parties will be looking at these developments quite keenly. We've mentioned the likes of the ANC, but also the EFF as well, who would be watching these developments quite closely. Maybe let's speak to this element. When the ANC considers placing its own candidate, what kind of qualities do you think they'd be looking for here or this time around to convince Johannesburg residents to vote for the party or their candidate?
Well, the obvious one will be if the ANC were to put up a candidate who was younger than 50, that would be a good start, considering that Mashaba is in his 60s and Helen Zille is in her 70s. So if they can get a candidate who is not on the SASA metrics, that will be a good start. Possibly if they can find a woman, possibly someone who is not what we've always had, a black male in his 50s who will tell us about the beauty of the liberation struggle, the beauty of the National Democratic Revolution. You know, the voter today, really, I said this to my daughter. She's an activist in her own right. I said to her, I've come to a sad realization that you can't run an election campaign unless you have campaigners who are actually less than 25 years old, because that is where the new media is. And these people understand how it works. And even the messaging, the framing, the language that is being used. So the ANC will do well if they learn. The experts are right here in South Africa. The influencers are right here in South Africa. Social media content creators are right here in South Africa. So if they get out of the old skin and say to themselves, we're now in a brave new world. It's a world we haven't traveled, but we are prepared to give it our all. And as I said earlier on this very program, that the ANC does exceptionally well when it looks back into the past. It now has to learn to look into the future with a better footing, considering what has been happening in South Africa in the last, let's say, 12 months, where there are indications that the country has actually turned the corner. I know it took 8 years, but there are green shoots in the economy, and that is a welcome thing. So the ANC does have a footing. They must put that foot forward and make sure that they have a candidate who is likable. You know, and elections are funny things. They go beyond the manifesto. You have to be likable. You must speak very well, and you must appear to be accessible, even if you're not.
Sipo, let's turn our focus to Johannesburg residents or residents in Gauteng specifically who've been contending with various issues, including water challenges, but also service-related issues, including intermittent power in some parts of the city as well. This time around, as we approach closer and closer to the elections this year, what do you think will be top of mind, especially as residents decide on who should lead the city?
Water.
Yeah.
Water, electricity, basic services. Residents want basic services. Anyone who, I've seen the DA, they've already run with the water campaign. All the political parties will be looking at water. Everyone is looking at the basic services. Where can you deliver the basic services? If you can, that is what residents
Road
want.
infrastructure as well. Potholes are a mess in the city.
Pillaging. The infrastructure is pillaging all over the city. But all of those are all things that are key in terms of the building of local government, water, electricity, and make sure a clean city. Residents also want a clean city. If you have those three things, you have the vote of residents. That's what the political parties will be fighting over.
We continue this discussion in a short while, of course, unpacking some of the week's leading news stories with our panel of guests. Do stay with us. We continue our feature this week. We unpack some of the leading stories of the week. Joining us is political sciences professor Dirk Kotze. I'm also joined in studio by Business Day journalist Snesipho Schreiber. And lastly, we're also joined by author and columnist Begsisa Mncube. Professor Kotze, I'll continue with you. Snesipho was already telling us about some of the issues that will be top of mind for Johannesburg residents as we enter close to the elections this year. But speaking to issues around crime and policing, I mean, these have once again become a central election issue in Gauteng. Don't you agree?
Yes, that is important, and it has been for many elections, has been a very important issue. But I agree with Ms. Schreiber that on top of that are these service delivery issues, infrastructural matters, water, electricity, roads, potholes, traffic lights, all of those things that are still even more important than the crime situation at the moment. We have seen some of the crime statistics that have been released lately, and there are some positive signs actually amongst these statistics, especially those that affect the individuals. So the crime is indeed something which affects all of us on a daily basis, and we are very much concerned about it. But at the top of the list for this election, and I think for the daily lives of most residents in Gauteng in general, the issues about water, electricity, infrastructure, services are number one.
Yeah. Begsisa, earlier on, we were also speaking to issues at the Madlanga Commission, where we had General Sibiya testifying earlier this week. But tying into this current discussion we're having, public trust in policing was already fragile, some might argue. So after the Madlanga testimony and this week's crime headlines, in your view, does confidence erode even further this time around?
It is terrible for the South African police services, what we have witnessed in the last few weeks. The police officers talking about, I asked for Ozempic as opposed to BBL kind of things. Obviously, the big talking point this week is the testimony of Shadrach Sibiya, who, in my opinion, maybe not educated, should not have ever been promoted beyond being a sergeant in the police. He ends up being our deputy national commissioner. And he is the most inarticulate, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He being asked, why did you send a disbandment letter of your own over and above what the minister had said? And he asking people, General Khumalo, to find reasons why the political killing trust team was being disbanded, something that he had nothing to do with. So that kind of incoherence is not actually performative. It's just not an individual. It's a structural issue in the South African police services. Remember how we lost almost 9 years with another person who also is implicated in the Madlanga Commission, Becky Cele. I mean, this country hasn't.
Seems that we've lost Begsisa there. But Snesipho, maybe let me continue with you. Commissions often reveal serious problems or even uncomfortable truths, some may argue. But do they historically then translate into measurable reform, like some are demanding within the SAPS?
I think when it comes to the Commission's outcomes, everyone has to take accountability. For instance, Ekurhuleni, city of Ekurhuleni. So the issue about almost 300 police officers with convictions still being police officers, that report was said to have served in council, either in closed session or in open session. But last week we saw the mayor having a press briefing saying that those people are suspended. These issues had been before, if they were not before MAYCO, they were before the city manager. So for the recommendations of this of the Madlanga Commission to be effective, everyone who has received a report to take actions they should. With the SAPS, I'll come back to it, the team that has been mandated to investigate the police officers, already they've arrested an SANDF senior official who is currently in court. So they are busy with their investigations. We'll have to see at the end of the investigations, they have about 3 months. That's what General Masamula said. They have about 3 months to investigate the criminal cases against senior police officers. After that, we will see whether or not the recommendations or the work of this particular commission was effective.
Professor Kosa, from a political science perspective, how can institutions then rebuild legitimacy after repeated credibility setbacks like what we are hearing about at these commissions?
Yes, this is always a huge challenge. Trust is because it is in the minds of the people who are affected by it. And that means the South African public in the first instance, but also other institutions. Trust is normally built by results, the results of what they are doing. That in the past they haven't produced results, they didn't react quickly enough to arrest, or the results of commissions of inquiry and so on. Now the idea is that they must do it quicker and they must be successful in what they are doing. So there is a sense that they have turned their conduct, the way in which they do their work, that has changed. The procedures that they are following, that if there's persons still amongst them who are identified as acting unethically, that there's quick action when that is identified. That it is conveyed to the public in general, that they are not denying that these things are happening. I think from that point of view, the Matlanga Commission actually does produce results. It does contribute to this because it does give the opportunity for the persons who are now identified as possibly being involved in criminal activities or activities related to that they are mentioned by name. It's not actually only sort of general accusations, general points that are being made. At the same time, the persons who have been there to try to counter that are, and therefore let's call them the good cops, they are also identified. And what is important, I think, is to see that there are good cops and bad cops in the South African Police Service, which I think is a good opportunity for the police service in order to say, don't treat us all as being people who are intent to commit some or other form of crime, or that's unethical in our conduct. So I think from that point of view, what is there for the next step after the commission, as well as what Ms. Schreiber was now talking about, is even this interim investigation by the police. That's real tests. Whether they will ultimately, the public trust in the police service will increase over time.
Snesipo, maybe from a sentiment perspective, maybe let's kind of track the general feeling around the Matlanga Commission and its hearings. Do you get a sense that there's real confidence that we will see real reform within the SAPS in the aftermath of this commission and its findings?
There has to be. I think one thing that the Matlanga Commission has sort of exposed to South African, that the reform is necessary and it's not negotiable. It's not negotiable. There has to be a reform in the SAPS. There has to be a reform so that the justice system itself can be able to be effective to the people that it serves. It is not up to them to take it or not. It is, and it's a thing that they have to do. It's a mandate or not. If they don't do that, they all lose their jobs.
Let me thank my guests for a very insightful discussion tonight. We had UNISA Political Sciences Professor Dirk Kotze. We're also joined in studio by Business Day journalist Newzroom Schreiber. And we are also joined a bit earlier by a columnist as well as author, Begisisa Ngube, thanking them all for their perspective this